My name is Cassandra Pierce, and the night my world shattered started with champagne and ended in ashes. I was 28, a senior brand strategist at Morrison and Hayes, engaged to the love of my life, or so I believed. My younger sister Fiona had always been my closest friend, the one person I trusted without question. That trust became my greatest mistake. The engagement party was perfect. White roses everywhere, soft jazz playing, friends laughing over expensive wine. I wore ivory silk, my engagement ring catching the light with every gesture. Fiona stood beside me in emerald green, her smile bright as she raised her glass for a toast. To my sister, she said, her voice warm, may you have everything you deserve. I remember thinking how lucky I was. Perfect career, perfect fiancé, perfect sister. The universe laughed at my ignorance. Because 3 hours later, I discovered my fiancé in the coat room with Fiona, his hands tangled in her hair, her lipstick smeared across his collar. The champagne in my stomach turned to acid. I screamed, but only inside. My lungs burned with silent agony. Tears gathered, but none fell. I stood there, motionless, my heart breaking soundlessly in my chest. That was the night I stopped believing in mercy and started learning the art of silence. I left without a word. My legs carried me through the venue's back exit while my mind screamed silent prayers that I'd imagined it all. The cold autumn air hit my face, but I barely felt it. Behind me, music continued playing. People kept laughing. The party went on, completely unaware that the guest of honor had just witnessed her own destruction. I walked 6 blocks in heels before my feet started bleeding. Only then did I stop, leaning against a brick wall in an alley that smelled like rain and garbage. My phone buzzed constantly, calls from my fiancé Warren, texts from Fiona. I didn't look. Couldn't look. A taxi finally stopped when I flagged it down. The driver asked where I was going. I gave him my best friend's address without thinking. Nina lived across town in a studio apartment that smelled like coffee and art supplies. She answered the door in pajamas, took one look at my face, and pulled me inside. What happened? She whispered. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. The words were stuck somewhere between my heart and my throat, too heavy to speak aloud. Nina didn't push. She made tea, gave me clean clothes, and let me cry on her couch until sunrise. When the tears finally stopped, I felt hollow, like someone had scooped out my insides and left only skin behind. My phone had died sometime during the night. I was grateful for the silence. Nina handed me her laptop without asking questions. I logged into my email, half expecting messages of concern. Instead, I found something worse. A group chat. Fiona and Warren. 6 months of messages. My hand shook as I scrolled. Flirtation that turned to planning. Meetings disguised as coffee dates. Hotel rooms paid for with credit cards I'd helped Warren pick out. And worst of all, screenshots of my own text messages to Fiona, the ones where I'd gushed about wedding plans and how much I loved him. They'd laughed about them, called me naive, said I deserved better than to know the truth. I closed the laptop slowly, carefully, like it might explode. Nina watched from the kitchen doorway. Tell me what you need, she said quietly. Time, I whispered. I need time to think. I didn't go home. Couldn't face the apartment Warren and I shared, where his cologne probably still lingered on the bathroom counter and our engagement photos hung on every wall. Instead, I checked into a budget hotel near the airport, the kind of place where people came to disappear. The room was small and sterile. Beige walls, scratchy sheets, a television that only got 3 channels. Perfect. I needed boring, needed empty. My thoughts were loud enough without distractions. I made a list on hotel stationery. Call off engagement. Tell no one why. Move out. Find new apartment. Keep job. Stay professional. The last item I underlined 3 times. Whatever happened next, I couldn't let this destroy my career. Morrison and Hayes was my foundation, the one thing I'd built completely on my own. Fiona and Warren had taken my heart. They wouldn't take my future too. That night, I ate vending machine crackers and watched infomercials until my eyes burned. Sleep felt dangerous, like I might wake up and have to face reality all over again. Monday morning arrived like a punishment. I dressed in my sharpest suit, applied makeup to hide the exhaustion, and walked into Morrison and Hayes with my head high. My coworkers smiled and waved, oblivious. Good. That's what I wanted. My boss, Patricia Chun, called me into her office mid-morning. She was in her 50s, sharp-eyed and brilliant, the kind of woman who noticed everything. I braced myself for questions about the weekend. Instead, she said, "I'm promoting you to creative director." The board approved it Friday. Congratulations, Cassandra. The news should have filled me with joy. Instead, it felt like armor, exactly what I needed. I thanked her calmly, shook her hand, and returned to my desk. Power was better than pity. Success was better than sympathy. At lunch, my phone finally rang. Warren. I answered on the last ring. "We need to talk," he said, his voice strained. "No," I replied. "We don't." "Cassie, please." "It wasn't." "If you say it wasn't what it looked like, I'll hang up." Silence. "Then I'm sorry." "Good," I said softly. "Live with that." I ended the call and blocked his number. Fiona tried harder. She showed up at my hotel on Tuesday evening, somehow tracking me down through Nina, who apologized profusely later. I saw her through the window, hair pulled back, makeup free, looking younger than her 25 years. She knocked for 10 minutes before giving up. She left a letter under the door. I stared at it for an hour before finally opening it. "Cassie, I don't know how to explain what happened. I never meant to hurt you. Warren and I, it just happened. We couldn't help how we felt. I know you're angry, but you're my sister. We can fix this. Please call me." The letter crumpled in my fist. Couldn't help how we felt. As if betrayal was an accident, like tripping on a sidewalk or spilling coffee. As if 6 months of lies were just bad luck. I didn't respond. Instead, I went to the hotel gym and ran on the treadmill until my lungs burned. Physical pain was simpler than emotional agony. Easier to control. The next week passed in mechanical motions. I worked 12-hour days, buried myself in projects, and avoided every personal phone call. My parents tried reaching out, but I let their messages pile up unanswered. They'd want explanations, tears, family meetings. I had none of that to give. Nina visited twice, bringing takeout and quiet company. She never asked what I was planning. She knew me well enough to understand I was gathering strength, preparing for something bigger than grief. On Friday evening, I signed a lease for a new apartment. Modern, minimal, across town from anywhere Warren or Fiona might look for me. The landlord handed me the keys, and for the first time in days, I felt something close to satisfaction. Moving out of Warren's place took 3 hours. I hired movers, took only what was mine, and left without a note. He wasn't home, probably at work, or maybe with Fiona. I didn't care anymore. The new apartment smelled like fresh paint. I unpacked slowly, deliberately, placing each item like I was building a fortress. This was my space, mine alone. By the second week, people at work started noticing the missing engagement ring. I kept my answers vague. It didn't work out, I'd say with a polite smile, then change the subject. Sympathy made my skin crawl. I wanted respect, not rescue. Patricia pulled me aside again. "If you need time off, just ask." "I don't," I assured her. "Work helps." She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Good, because the Hartley account needs a complete rebrand, and you're the only one I trust with it." The Hartley account was massive, a luxury hotel chain worth millions in billing. Landing it would cement my reputation. I accepted without hesitation. Grief could wait. Ambition couldn't. That night, I researched the Hartley family. Old money. High standards. They valued discretion and excellence. Perfect. I'd give them both while quietly rebuilding my life from the ashes of betrayal. As I closed my laptop, a text appeared from an unknown number. "You can't ignore us forever." Fiona had gotten a new phone. I blocked it immediately. The Hartley pitch was 3 weeks away. I assembled a small team, carefully selecting colleagues who were talented but not gossipy. Every detail mattered. Every presentation slide had to be flawless. During a late-night work session, one of my team members, a junior designer named Trevor, mentioned he'd worked with a small boutique agency recently. They're run by this young woman, really sharp. I think her name was Fiona Pierce. My pen stopped mid-stroke. Fiona Pierce? Yeah, why? You know her? I forced my expression to stay neutral. Distantly. What's her agency like? Trevor shrugged. Decent work, I guess. But she kept missing deadlines, seemed distracted. We ended up switching vendors. Interesting. So Fiona's little business venture wasn't going well. I filed that information away carefully, then steered the conversation back to our project. But that night, alone in my apartment, I allowed myself to research her agency. Small website, limited portfolio, flashy promises but thin results. She was trying to play in professional leagues without the skills to back it up. The universe works in strange ways. 2 days later, I learned that Fiona's agency was competing for a contract with Mitchell and Associates, a mid-sized firm that happened to be a direct competitor of Morrison and Hayes. They were considering both agencies for a major campaign. Patricia mentioned it casually during a strategy meeting. Mitchell's still shopping around. If we could land them, it'd be a huge win. They're interviewing several smaller agencies first. An idea formed slowly, carefully. I didn't want to destroy Fiona out of spite. But if she happened to fail on her own merit while I succeeded on mine, that was just business. I volunteered to prepare a competitive analysis. Patricia approved immediately. Within days, I had detailed reports on every agency Mitchell was considering, including Fiona's. Her weaknesses were obvious. Inconsistent branding, missed deadlines, a reputation for overpromising. All I had to do was make sure Mitchell's team heard about it through the right professional channels. A few strategic conversations, a casual mention here and there. Nothing dishonest, just highlighting facts. Warren tried one more time. He showed up at Morrison and Hayes' reception, asking to see me. Security called my desk. I told them to escort him out. 15 minutes later, he was waiting by my car in the parking garage. I stopped when I saw him, keys in hand, debating whether to call security again or just leave. 5 minutes, he pleaded. That's all I'm asking. I checked my watch. For minutes now. He looked terrible. Thinner, shadows under his eyes, wrinkled shirt. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated. Instead, I felt nothing. I made a mistake, he started. Fiona and I were not together anymore. It was stupid, meaningless. You had 6 months to realize that, I interrupted. You chose differently. I know, but your time's up. I walked past him to my car, unlocked it smoothly, and drove away without looking back. His reflection disappeared in my rearview mirror like smoke. That night, I poured a glass of wine and stood on my balcony, watching the city lights flicker below. Closure didn't come from conversations. It came from choices. The Hartley pitch consumed my focus completely. I worked late every night, perfecting every detail. My team was brilliant, efficient, creative, hungry for success. We built a presentation that was equal parts elegance and innovation. Meanwhile, word filtered back through professional networks. Mitchell and Associates had narrowed their choices to 3 agencies. Fiona's was still in the running, barely. Apparently, her pitch had been enthusiastic but unfocused. Industry speak for amateur. I didn't feel guilty. This wasn't sabotage. It was simply making sure the right information reached the right people. If Fiona couldn't deliver quality work, clients deserved to know. Patricia was impressed with my dedication. You've been unstoppable lately, she said one afternoon. Whatever's driving you, keep it up. I smiled politely. Heartbreak made excellent fuel. It burned clean and hot, leaving no room for weakness. That evening, my mother called. I answered, knowing I couldn't avoid her forever. Cassandra, honey, we need to talk about what happened. There's nothing to talk about, I said gently. But Fiona made her choice. So did I. The Hartley presentation was perfection. We pitched in their penthouse boardroom, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. I spoke confidently, passionately, outlining a rebranding strategy that would modernize their image while honoring their heritage. The Hartley executives listened intently. When we finished, the CEO, a dignified woman in her 60s named Margaret Hartley, smiled. This is exactly what we needed. When can you start? We signed the contract that afternoon. Patricia practically glowed with pride. The commission alone would be substantial, but more importantly, my reputation was now cemented. I wasn't just recovering from betrayal, I was thriving because of it. That evening, my phone buzzed with a message from Trevor. Mitchell chose a different agency. Heard the one run by that Fiona person didn't make the cut. I set my phone down carefully. Karma had done its work. I hadn't destroyed Fiona. I'd simply let her destroy herself while making sure the right people were watching. Justice, I was learning, didn't always require violence. Sometimes it just required patience. 3 months after the engagement party, I finally agreed to meet my parents for lunch. They chose a quiet restaurant downtown, neutral territory. My mother hugged me immediately, tears in her eyes. My father looked uncomfortable, the way he always did with emotional situations. We ordered food we didn't really want and made small talk that felt like walking through a minefield. Finally, my mother said, "Fiona wants to apologize properly. She's been struggling, Cassie. Her business isn't doing well in Warren." "I don't care about Warren," I interrupted softly. "But she's your sister." "She was," I corrected. "Now she's just someone I used to know." My father cleared his throat. "Your mother, and I think you're being too harsh. People make mistakes." I set down my fork carefully. A mistake is forgetting someone's birthday. What Fiona did was a choice. Multiple choices over 6 months. That's not an accident. The table fell silent. My mother dabbed her eyes with a napkin. I felt a twinge of guilt, but not enough to take back my words. They needed to understand. Forgiveness wasn't something I owed anyone. We finished lunch in uncomfortable quiet. I paid the bill and left. Winter arrived early that year. The city transformed under fresh snow, everything covered in clean white silence. I found comfort in the cold. It matched my mood perfectly. Work continued to flourish. The Hartley campaign launched to rave reviews, earning Morrison and Hayes industry recognition. Patricia hinted at partnership opportunities. My career trajectory was steeper than ever. Fiona's agency, meanwhile, quietly closed. I learned this through Nina, who heard it from a mutual acquaintance. Apparently, Fiona had taken a job with a larger firm as a junior designer, a significant step down from business owner. I didn't celebrate, just acknowledged it as fact. The universe had a way of balancing scales. I simply helped tip them in the right direction. One evening, I received a letter forwarded from my old address. Handwritten, Fiona's distinctive looping script. I almost threw it away unopened. Instead, I made tea, sat by the window, and read it slowly. "Cassie, I know you won't respond, but I need to say this. I'm sorry, truly sorry. What I did was unforgivable, and I don't expect your forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that losing you has been the worst consequence of all my terrible choices." The letter continued. My business failed. Warren and I broke up. Turned out he wasn't who either of us thought he was. I've lost almost everything. But losing you hurts most. I see now what I destroyed, and I'll carry that regret forever. I'm not asking for anything. Just wanted you to know I understand what I did. I hope one day you find peace. Fiona. I read it 3 times, waiting to feel something, anger, satisfaction, maybe even pity. Nothing came. Just that same hollow quiet that had become my constant companion. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer. Not as keepsake, but as evidence. A reminder of what happens when you trust the wrong people. That night, I dreamed of the engagement party for the first time in months. But in the dream, I walked away from the coat room before seeing anything. I simply turned around, left the venue, and drove toward a sunrise that never ended. I woke up feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Maybe peace wasn't about forgiveness. Maybe it was about letting go of the need to make others understand your pain. By spring, my life had completely transformed. I'd been officially made partner at Morrison and Hayes, youngest in the firm's history. My new corner office had windows that caught morning light perfectly. I hired an assistant, expanded my team, and started mentoring junior strategists. People at industry events knew my name now. Casandra Pierce from Morrison and Hayes, said with respect, sometimes envy. I'd become exactly what I'd always wanted to be, forged stronger by betrayal rather than broken by it. Nina threw me a celebration dinner. Just close friends, good wine, laughter that felt genuine instead of forced. For the first time in months, I looked around a table and felt content. "You've been amazing to watch," Nina said later as we cleaned up. "The way you handled everything, most people would have fallen apart." I dried a wine glass slowly. I almost did, but falling apart felt too much like letting them win. She hugged me tight. "I'm proud of you." Those words meant more than any professional accolade, because the people who stayed deserved more credit than the ones who left. I ran into Warren at a charity gala that summer. Literally, walked straight into him while grabbing champagne from a passing waiter. We both froze, glasses in hand, the air between us thick with unfinished history. He looked older, more tired. "Cassie," he said carefully, like my name might shatter if spoken too loudly. "Warren." I kept my voice neutral, professionally polite. "You look amazing." "Thank you." I meant it as dismissal, but he kept talking. "I heard about your partnership. Congratulations." "I appreciate that." I started to move past him. "Wait," he touched my arm lightly. I stepped back instinctively. He noticed, withdrew his hand. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Really sorry. What I did was—" "In the past," I interrupted gently. "Where it belongs." His eyes searched mine, looking for something, forgiveness, maybe, or at least acknowledgement of his pain. I gave him neither. Just a polite smile and a smooth exit toward better company. The truth was, I had forgiven them, not because they deserved it, but because I deserved peace. Forgiveness didn't mean reconciliation. It meant releasing the weight I'd been carrying so I could move forward lighter. But forgiveness was private. They didn't get to witness it, benefit from it, or feel absolved by it. My healing belonged to me alone. That fall, I started dating again. Nothing serious, just dinner with interesting people, conversations that didn't revolve around betrayal or business. Rediscovering what it felt like to laugh without calculating the cost. One evening, my date asked about my family. I paused, considering how to answer. "It's complicated," I finally said. "I have parents I see occasionally. A sister I used to be close to." "What happened?" he asked gently. "She taught me an important lesson about trust." He didn't push for details. I appreciated that. Some stories didn't need retelling. They just needed to be survived. We finished dinner, said goodnight, and I drove home through streets that finally felt less lonely. The apartment I returned to was mine. The life I'd built was mine. And that was enough. 2 years after the engagement party, I received a wedding invitation. Not mine, Fiona's. She was marrying someone I'd never heard of, a man whose name meant nothing to me. The invitation was simple, elegant, addressed in her familiar handwriting. I held it for a long moment, feeling nothing. No anger, no sadness, just mild curiosity about whether she expected me to attend. I RSVP'd unable to attend and sent a modest gift, crystal picture frames, the kind you give when you want to be polite, but not personal. She sent a thank you card weeks later, brief and formal, acknowledging my distance with quiet acceptance. My mother called after the wedding. "She asked about you," she said softly. "That's nice," I replied, meaning it. I hoped Fiona had found happiness, not because I'd forgiven what she'd done, but because her happiness no longer affected mine. We were strangers now, connected only by DNA and history, and I was okay with that. Some relationships couldn't survive betrayal. Accepting that truth was its own kind of freedom. Morrison and Hayes continued thriving. I led campaigns for major brands, mentored rising talent, and built a reputation for excellence. My name appeared in industry publications, my strategies studied in marketing courses. But success felt different now, quieter, more personal. I'd learned that achievement meant nothing if built on foundations of pain. So I focused on balance, challenging work, genuine friendships, peaceful evenings in my apartment that had slowly transformed into a home. I adopted a cat, a dignified tabby named Oliver who judged my life choices from various sunny windowsills. I took cooking classes, learned pottery, and spent weekends hiking trails where self-service disappeared and thoughts could finally slow down. The woman I'd become barely resembled the girl who'd stood frozen in that coat room. Betrayal had carved away everything soft, everything naive. What remained was stronger, sharper, more careful, but also more authentic. More mine. Patricia noticed during a quarterly review. You've changed, she observed. Not just professionally. You seem settled. Content. I smiled. I learned to build on solid ground. 5 years later, I stood at another engagement party, this one celebrating my colleague and friend, Marcus, proposing to his longtime girlfriend. The venue was smaller, more intimate. String lights and laughter, champagne toasts and genuine joy. I watched them dance, their happiness unforced and real, and felt no bitterness. Just appreciation for witnessing love done right. Nina found me by the dessert table. Remember your engagement party? She asked quietly. Every detail, I admitted. But it feels like it happened to someone else. In a way, it did, Nina said. You're completely different now. She was right. The Casandra who trusted blindly, loved recklessly, and believed family meant unconditional loyalty was gone. The woman who replaced her was wiser, stronger, and infinitely more careful about who she allowed close. As the night wound down, Marcus pulled me aside. Thank you for coming. Your friendship means everything. I hugged him. May you always be this happy. And I meant it. Their joy didn't diminish mine. Some people got their happy endings early. Others had to build them from scratch. By year 6, my parents and I had reached an understanding. We maintained polite contact. Holiday dinners, occasional phone calls, conversations that stayed surface level. They'd learned not to mention Fiona unless I asked first. I rarely did. Sometimes my mother would share updates anyway. She's doing well. 2 kids now. Seems happy. That's good, I'd reply, genuinely meaning it. Fiona's happiness didn't erase what she'd done, but it also didn't require my bitterness. We existed in separate worlds that occasionally touched but never intertwined. The question I'd asked myself 1,000 times, could I ever fully forgive her, had finally been answered. Not with a dramatic reconciliation or tearful reunion, but with quiet indifference. Forgiveness wasn't about restoring what was broken. It was about releasing its power over your present. I'd moved on. That was my peace. One evening, I found Fiona's old letter while organizing files. I read it again with fresh eyes, feeling nothing but distance. The words that once carried weight now felt like artifacts from someone else's life. I shredded the letter slowly, methodically. Not out of anger, but out of completion. That chapter had ended. Time to stop rereading it. 7 years after that devastating night, I met someone. His name was Graham, a journalist who wrote about architecture and urban development. We met at a gallery opening, started talking about design philosophy, and didn't stop for 3 hours. He was different, patient, kind, secure enough in himself not to need constant validation. We dated slowly, carefully, both of us carrying old wounds we'd learned to heal from rather than hide. When he asked about my past, I told him the truth. Not the dramatic version, just the facts. Betrayed by people I trusted, spent years rebuilding, emerged stronger and more careful. Do you regret any of it? He asked one evening over dinner. I thought carefully. I regret loving people who didn't deserve it. But I don't regret who I became afterward. He reached across the table, took my hand gently. I'm glad you became her. She's pretty remarkable. For the first time in years, I felt my guard lowering. Not disappearing, just softening enough to let someone good through. We took our time. No rushing, no pressure. Just honest conversations and growing trust. And slowly, carefully, I learned that betrayal hadn't destroyed my capacity to love. It had just taught me to choose more wisely. 10 years after the engagement party, I stood in my own backyard, surrounded by close friends and family. My parents were there, older, softer, still learning to respect my boundaries. Nina was my maid of honor, laughing as she adjusted my veil. Graham waited at the small altar we'd built together, his smile warm and sure. This wedding wasn't about grand gestures or proving anything. It was about 2 people who'd survived their own storms, choosing to build shelter together. As I walked toward him, I thought briefly of Fiona. Wondered if she ever thought of me. If she built a good life from the ashes of her mistakes. I hope she had. Not because I'd forgiven everything. Some wounds leave permanent scars, but because holding onto anger would have meant she still controlled part of my story. She didn't. This moment was entirely mine. Graham took my hands, his eyes reflecting a decade of my growth, my strength, my careful journey back to trust. Ready, he whispered. I smiled, genuinely, completely, more than I've ever been. The ceremony was simple, the vows honest, the celebration afterward joyful. And as the sun set over our small gathering, I realized something profound. The best revenge wasn't destroying the people who hurt you. It was building a life so beautiful, they became irrelevant to it. I'd won, not by tearing them down, but by rising so high they couldn't reach me even if they tried. And that was peace.